Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Road to Freedom podcast. Your two normal libertarian hosts joining you once again today to talk about the primaries for Michigan that happened so that we can apply it to a broader context for your own personal situation. And also we're going to get into applications of the NAP, the non-aggression principle that we talked about last time. We have about 5 or 6 topics that we're going to cover over the next number of podcasts. And then we found a really good article from someone who seems to be a libertarian who has 6 different complaints about the NAP and where it might fall short. I think that's going to be really good. So those are going to be the next coming episodes. We just want to introduce ourselves once again because you may be joining us for the first time, because I doubt we've made our complete goal of getting all the people that we want to listen to in the first 2-3 episodes. But I'm Patrick Studebaker.
Matt Martin.
And we're just 2 regular guys sitting here talking about how much we hate taxes, we like freedom, and we're applying our understanding of libertarian principles at a local level so that we can affect change at a greater level. And unfortunately, we had primaries yesterday, and it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of freedom in the world, or at least in Michigan here, because among just the candidates who were on the ballot, there was also a number of different proposals for tax and millages that seemed to pass by overwhelming majority. There were things like senior citizens items, giving taxes to programs that already existed, and then we also have schools, which education is one of the NAP principles we're going to apply as well down the road in future podcasts. And there just seemed to be a number of villages that just passed with overwhelming support, and it's kind of the makeup that we have in our surrounding nature, that we tend to be less conservative in wanting to preserve what you earn. One of the things that we voted on, that I had to look what the history of it was this millage for senior adult services, and it's a $35 a year for residents who own property with a taxable value of $100,000. So again, we're talking about the talking platform of the social left of taxing the rich, because anything really over probably $40,000 for them was rich, and it's a $2.82 million annually millage to alleviate a waiting list for in-home and community services for an area agency of aging, is what it's called, that is doubling the budget that it already has, $2.1 million, and it wants to double it. And unfortunately, people agreed to it. First of all, a lot of the times it doesn't affect them. So they're okay voting against their neighbor, which is an act of force. You're allowing people to say what other people can do with their property. And here's another thing. There's a waiting list already. That's because a free system is involved, and you don't have the means of control through a private property, through a private organization that can dictate where to allocate the best resources. A waiting list can still happen with a private company, but here you have a waiting list where you have a free service for seniors. Again, just like Social Security, where once again giving to seniors, I don't know why there's such a special interest, because seniors should be the ones who are less likely to ask for a handout, and we're just saying it's okay for the government to come in, steal money from those who have $100,000 or more, and it's $35, but at the same time, if a person came up to you in the street and said, out of your $100, I want $3 and give it to me, it's still theft. And another thing about the senior tax is that we just got done being taxed again on uh, assisting homeless people obtain housing. And then I found an article that said people are taxed 97 to 100 different ways depending on what you do. Income tax, which you're already paying 30% of what you earn, and sales tax and fishing licenses and CPL carries and all the taxes that come about. We're adding another one to this. One of the articles discusses that that it actually is going to most likely tax seniors to help seniors. So once again, we're like the stadium. We're taxing those who are in competition against the stadium. We're taxing the seniors to help other seniors. And I have no clue why this isn't just taken care of with a private organization with private money.
Yeah, it just seems ridiculous to tax even seniors to help seniors, but it's ridiculous to tax us to help out on something that, like, I mean, it doesn't affect us right now. It doesn't. All it is just taking more of our money.
Yeah, and
it's just like the social security.
Right, exactly.
They take the money now, and we're never going to see it.
No, by 2030 we'll be insolvent. And again, okay, you could maybe make the case in the 20s that people weren't ready for retirement, whatever. So you had to have Social Security. But by now, I'm sorry, seniors are the ones who are most likely to have a better income. They've had more time to save. And if you don't know by now that you have to save money for retirement, if that's what you want to do, then you need to take this on yourself. I would be embarrassed if I had to go to my grandchildren and ask them to put me up, especially if I can afford it. This isn't a program that says, senior citizens who are living in squalor, who can't afford only cat tuna to take care of themselves. It's just a senior program that is offered to anybody who meets the age criteria. So again, we wouldn't take this situation if someone came up to you in the street and just said, "Hey, you need to give me $30 every year, or we'll come in with guns and take it from you, and I promise we'll do something really nice with it for your grandma." I'm sorry, but it's still theft.
Yeah, if I want to do something nice for my grandma, I'm going to do something nice for my grandma with my own money. I don't need someone to tell me to do it.
Yeah, and I just can't believe out of all the organizations, the YMCA or any of the plethora of different organizations out there who take in way more money and can distribute way more appropriately, can't take this on. But no, it's because there's a government program, and the free program has created a waiting list, so much so where they've had to take a $2.1 million budget and double it. And it's not going to ever stop. Like that budget's never going to come down. There's never going to be a understanding of, well, okay, we've taxed this for 5 years. Now it's time to give it up now, and we need to decrease what we're taking from people. In the place where we live, the voters haven't seen really a tax that I've ever seen them defeat, other than the 911 millage, and that was only because it seemed like it was going to affect more people. So this is a tax on $100,000 people, but every phone carrier, so every phone number was going to be charged to offset this cost for this new 911 facility that they've had, and it failed. But then they went through with it anyways, and they're still finding the funds magically. I just loved the idea of them telling us that. I've sat in a meeting where one of the head directors was talking about how, we really need to have the surcharge, but if we don't get it, we're still going through with it. And the millage, or the surcharge didn't pass, and they mysteriously found the money somewhere else. So it's like, oh, okay, so taxing is just the easy thing to do in this situation.
Yeah, because they don't have to put in any of find money somewhere else in the government. They're like, we'll just tax these people. They don't understand.
Right. Do you want to say anything about the two libertarian candidates for governor?
Yeah. One what seemed Tatar. He seemed like he had a. He was definitely more of a. I don't know what kind of
Radical?
general idea of what a libertarian is, except for his crazy. His number one priority was the smart meters.
Number one on his website. This is what I'm talking about when I say there are sometimes not normal people in the Libertarian Party. Like, where is the Libertarian Party of Michigan where they can come alongside this guy and be like, hey, you know what? I understand this is a passion project for you. You're a little nutso here, but come on, man. Like, throw us a bone, and you're good on wanting to take out half the government in the house, and you're good in taxes, and you're good at all this. But when your number one priority, especially when they were in the debate, is smart meters, you look like a crazy lunatic.
Yeah, because it's just I'm surprised somebody didn't come in and tell him like, hey, if you've got 8 topics here, could we throw smart meters down at 7 or 8? More people are willing to work with that, because I'm honestly between Bill, I don't know how to say his last name,
Galenu
and
Galenu?
Tatar.
Like
yeah, something like that. Between the two, the biggest holdup for me was Tatar had smart meters as number 1. Like, I love the fact that he wants to get rid of the Senate, the state Senate, and then make all the other government employees up, the House representatives and everything part-time. He wants to legalize at least marijuana right now, and just other good things. But smart meters number 1, come on.
No.
And
Yeah. I mean, be radical. If Trump has taught us anything, it's this is the time to be radical. I enjoy that about him. And the other guy, like I liked, he wasn't terrible, and I think he's of the idea of kind of incrementalism. But we were talking yesterday, and he just kind of seems like he's Republican light, and it's just too bad that we half the time when I go to the website for the Libertarian Party's nominee, it's some like hippie biker dude on a motorcycle, and it's like, yes, okay, we don't want to always be dressed in suits like everyone else, but you need to be taken seriously by people, and you need to take it seriously. It's like in the national candidacy where the dude for the Libertarian convention got up on stage and stripped. I'm like, that was a time where both candidates sucked. I mean, how many people did you talk to who was like, well, Trump probably pretty bad, but Clinton also terrible. And it's just like, that was our time.
Yeah.
And here's the time where you could probably have the national platform a little bit more highlighted, and you're like, I'm going to use my freedom to strip right here, and it's just stupid. And I it's one of those things where I just need to sign up for the party. I've been holding off on it, but I did find out recently that I am going to be nominated to the township committee for a township board, so that I have more direct involvement with our local township, and there's a lot of stuff that I want to do to get out the libertarian message. So I think having an influence in the party, at least on the Michigan standpoint, is something that I'm going to have to do here too.
Yeah, I just don't get why the Libertarian Party chooses some of the crazy sometimes, because, I mean, it's politics. You still kind of have to play the parts and, dress up in your suit and act a little more political, but you can still, be a libertarian and push your issues and stuff like that. You gotta look the part and play the part just a little. You don't have to be that far out there.
And I mean, here's the great thing about it. The rhetoric from both sides is there on their side, but we have a consistent philosophy. We don't want to do harm to others. You can take like marijuana is a perfect thing here in Michigan. we're so close to making it legalized, or at least decriminalized. We have the ability for people to have dispensaries and grow. But I know firsthand, trying to enact policies where I'm trying to get people who are growing marijuana to still have the ability to do so as a business. I'm still trying to understand the state making wild changes here and there, and they come through and they're saying, um, you need to have a policy enacted by such and such date. I think it's like December, and if you don't have it by that time, um, those places has to close. But we've already voted to have it pretty much somewhat legalized. It's not a full legalization like you have in Colorado, let's say, but they make it so it's a moving target. And I talked to one of the dispensary growers here, and there are crazy things enacted, like you can't own a firearm, and half the time, to protect the business, half the time these dispensaries are on the person's home property, because it's an agriculture, so
Yeah.
you're growing it and protecting it there. I mean, it's all these crazy things are enacted. If you had someone that came through and was like, "Hey, marijuana, why are we making this moving target? Why are we making it so hard?" The people have spoken. If you wanna go that route, and more people are legalizing it, so let's get out there and get out of the way of these people who the people around them are okay with it, and that should be a consistent message. But when you start talking about the electromagnetic frequencies of smart meters and how the government's reading how much power supply you're consuming, I mean, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. All right, so last episode we talked about the NAP, the non-aggression principle. What we talked about too is that the NAP is the worldview through which libertarians see their political sphere. We talked about how the NAP isn't the be-all, end-all for your ultimate worldview, but if you're looking at things through a political spectrum, libertarians view things through the non-aggression principle, which is you can't use physical violence, or that physical violence is illegitimate, and that violence against a person or property is immoral and illegitimate. It's also the idea that you don't have to use just physical violence to aggress against somebody, but if you work in such a way where harm can come to a person, that force, that use of force would be illegitimate. And we'll get into some of the critiques of that in later episodes, but we wanted to talk about certain about 5 or 6 subjects, and we'll definitely not get to all of them for this episode, which will be fine, where the NEP informs us. So these aren't episodes where we're going to be discussing in depth, here are the statistics for drug policies, or here's where we can limit taxes. This is a discussion about how the NAP comes into effect with these certain subjects, and they're kind of the big planks for libertarian-minded people.
So if we segue into libertarians and drugs, I had an article here that I found. The very beginning of it is a pretty good quote. It's at the core of libertarianism is a desire to uphold human dignity, and there's nothing more dignified than giving every mentally sound individual an opportunity to make their own decisions. Because at the heart of it, libertarians believe in legalizing all drugs. So, I mean, that quote right there is just, libertarians want people to have their own dignity and their own choices on their own lives. And why not legalize drugs and let people decide if they're going to do them or not?
Well, you mean you want to legalize heroin, cocaine, bath salts, all that stuff?
Oh, yeah.
Man.
The good stuff. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, and this isn't a requirement to use drugs. If these things became legal tomorrow, there's no way I'm sticking a needle in my arm. There's no way I'm snorting cocaine. I'm one of those people who hasn't even done marijuana before, and it's also a desire to legalize prescription drugs as well, to allow drug manufacturers to be unrestrained from developing niche drugs in order to treat ailments. Libertarian ideas don't support things like the FDA. Not to say that you would have drugs be unregulated, but they would be regulated by the market. You would have companies that would come in and say, this drug that helps with anxiety. Here's 3 different laboratories that have independently tested it, and here's the seal of approval, the A+ that we have on this, or here's independent testing that we've done to show that it's safe. And you would probably have that too for cocaine and heroin. You would have a greater trust in what you're putting into your body because you're taking it out of the streets, off the black market, and you're bringing it to light so that people can be held accountable for bad things and that a better product can be given to you.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things about marijuana especially, because that seems to be the most popular drug everyone wants to legalize. Like Michigan already, allows to get you a medical marijuana card. And for simple things like people who get chronic headaches and migraines and stuff like that, you think about all the amounts of drugs that people put into their bodies, like pharmaceutical drugs. It tears apart your kidney, just so much damage. But I mean, what is smoking marijuana really doing to you? I mean, you're still smoking, so there's smoke in your lungs. That's not always so good. But if somebody doesn't like taking pharmaceutical drugs for the pain they're having, then why not give them the opportunity to do something else?
Right. I mean, the old adage of no one's ever died from overdosing on marijuana. The fact that marijuana is a scheduled class 1 drug, which means it has 0 medical benefits. It's still highly illegal by the federal government. It cannot be tested in like university settings, except for I think there's one university the federal government allows testing on. It's kind of ridiculous. You're telling me that all these things that have been developed in other countries or that have been developed outside of the state's overview has 0 medical benefits when it's been shown. It's been shown that it helps. I mean, PTSD is one of those big things that people tout for the benefits of marijuana.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about Schedule 1 drugs being, or Class 1 drugs being no medical benefits, we literally, back in the 20s or whatnot, heroin, cocaine, they were all in medical things.
Sure, right, yeah.
Cough syrup used to have heroin in it.
Yeah. I mean, even Ritalin is pretty much the same form of heroin today, and we give that to 5-year-olds who decide to act like 5-year-olds.
Yeah. I found another thing in this article. They I don't know where they got their numbers, but they said there's some estimates that 40 million occasional users of illegal drugs in the United States, and most of those people are doing it in the privacy of their own homes. They're not endangering anybody. They're not bothering anybody. And this is just the occasional users. We're not talking the crackheads on the side of the road.
Right.
And
yeah.
And there's they say that many successful people use drugs and they admit to it. I mean, there's a lot of celebrities out there that do it. One person they decided to highlight was President Obama, former President Obama. He admitted to using marijuana, and he's actually quoted as saying, describing
the paragon of our
marijuana
virtue
as less dangerous than drinking alcohol. Yeah, so I mean, right there, alcohol is legal, and you got the former president of the free world saying that marijuana is less dangerous than drinking alcohol.
Yeah, I think we conjure up this image of, you're right, like the crackhead on the street, or the person who's tripping out who ends up running into traffic or something. But we don't have that same idea when we think about drinking. I mean, you and I see on a consistent basis the effects of alcohol on people, and it's way more dangerous to us for people who have been drinking. It's way more annoying. It's way more dangerous to that person, for those who overpartake in alcohol, than it is marijuana.
Yeah, like
So
how many
it's not
stories
a
do you hear
harm based
about?
idea.
Yeah, I mean, we hear so many stories about, uh, drunk fights, angry drunks, and stuff like that. Like, and take movies for example. I mean, I know it's a movie, but they always have the angry drunk character. Since when have they ever had the angry pothead character?
Right?
Never.
Yeah. There's
Nobody
this
nobody
British
gets
band.
angry when they're smoking weed.
There's this British band called The Streets, and they have a song about two people, one who's a pothead and one who's a drunk, and the drunk guy gets into fights and doesn't want the pothead to be a drain on society, and the pothead guy is just understanding that like, oh, here we are, we're just watching Carl Jung videos and we're playing Gran Turismo on the hardest level. The irony of it all, this is what it's called, and it shows the distinction. Like, yeah, okay, even if you're a pothead, you're just sitting at home, or you're doing stuff. Like, how many times have we watched Joe Rogan on his podcast smoke weed and have just insane conversations sometimes? I mean, his interview with Alex Jones, both alcohol and marijuana. I don't know which one made that one more entertaining, but um, the fact that you can be productive still under marijuana, and obviously it's one of those things where it's like it's allowable, but I don't know if I would do it myself. It's not a requirement to inject a needle into you, but it's giving people the freedom to do with their body what they want. We don't regulate the amount of cheeseburgers somebody eats. We don't regulate the amount of alcohol a person consumes. We don't do it for chocolate. We don't do it for tanning. We don't do it for exercise. All these things can be terrible for you in over or under abundance. So why is drugs this understanding of, oh, this is special, this is something that we have to criminalize? And once we do, we see the black market pops up. There's still a demand for it. Here's how you have people in the cartels get rich. I mean, half the time it's them coming across the border and selling to their distributors that get it in people's hands. And we've been at this drug war since, well, the 1920s is kind of when they started to make things illegal. And of course, who did they want to affect the most but were minorities in the United States? So honestly, it was a racist policy to try and decriminalize these things, because you just have to have a reason to harass people like this. But we saw it in the 60s, and we definitely saw it in the 80s under Reagan. And then, lo and behold, we come to find out that half the time the CIA or the DEA is assisting with these drops, especially the CIA, so that they can fund their black ops projects.
Yeah, I think the biggest example of the especially the drug war not working is the prohibition times. That's the biggest
Right.
example of why a war on drugs will never work, because I mean, you've made alcohol totally illegal, and not only did gang violence go up and the criminals get rich, but you had people brewing alcohol unregulated, unhygienic, and it led to plenty of deaths of people just drinking, Tommy's toilet water,
Yeah, and they go blind, or or it's just a bad batch and something happens to them, or it explodes because it has to be kept underground. And where did Al Capone get his money from? Well, he came up as a first an alcohol runner, and then he got into drugs. I mean, it arose the gang. The reason that we have an understanding of gangster mentality, like old school 20s gangster, not gangsta, is because of prohibition, and the Elliot Ness and the Untouchables. It was a war against alcohol that was done actually with a constitutional amendment, which is odd because around the same time, weed was taken out too, and you didn't have a constitutional amendment there. So there we see, even within the state, it's not consistent to holding to the Constitution. And you have a rise of criminal elements that can profit off a black market, because people still wanted it.
Yep.
And today too, like we've been hearing so much of, oh, it's the opioid crisis, it's the opioid epidemic. Well, the very fact that by and large in the United States, you have more deaths and more people misuse prescription drugs than you do with all illegal narcotics combined. 116 people die every day from opioid-related deaths. It's 11.5 million people misuse prescription drugs within the year. These numbers come from 2016. 42,000 plus people died from overdosing on opioids. 2.1 million people have an opioid use disorder, but then 948,000 people use heroin, or 170,000 people use heroin just for the first time. But 2.1 million people misuse prescription drugs for the first time. I mean, those are insane numbers to compare.
Yeah, just the fact that you have so many people like just abusing pharmaceutical drugs. Nobody, like, if somebody overdoses on OxyContin or something, nobody like tries to make OxyContin illegal. Then why aren't we trying to make those drugs illegal? If you're gonna villainize heroin and all these other drugs that people are taking and dying from, why not do it with the drugs that the so-called FDA approves and says is safe to take?
Right. And again, we're talking about what adult people can do with their body. If you want to destroy your body by overdosing on cheeseburgers, you have that ability. If you want to do it by overdosing on alcohol, you can do that. If you want to do that by skydiving and pulling the chute at the last possible second, you can do that. Those are things that you can do. But when it talks about injecting or ingesting things into your own body by your own freedom, I mean, how is that anybody else's business? Again, I don't think you should do it. It's something that I could probably argue is immoral, at least from the standpoint that I come by. But these are the question comes down to, with the NAP, is, do you want to use force, government violence, to throw people in cages with jail, or do you want to possibly lead to violent outbursts? I mean, how many times have we seen these like no-knock raids where it turns violent and dogs are killed, or people are shot by the police, or people the police using SWAT to come in and do drug raids? I mean, it's one thing if it's, oh, this person's a murderer, or this person has a hostage, or these are bank robbers, or these are people who are have an arsenal. But a majority of the time, SWAT raids are done against people who have drugs. Who cares? Who cares if they have drugs?
Yeah.
And who cares if these people are selling to other people? You don't have that same type of scrutiny with alcohol. Heck, we have raw milk as having carried out by FDA SWAT raids that we classify in the same line as a good use of force for SWAT and police and criminal violence, putting people into prison, state violence, that we have for illegal narcotics. Again, what does it matter if I want to exchange money for cocaine or money for raw milk that has been homogenized and pasteurized? Those two things are equal in the state's mind of, I shouldn't be allowed to do it. Where's the harm? If you want to argue, well, the harm comes from what you do while on the drugs, well, that's when you violate the principle of personal freedom of someone. If you go out and rob somebody while high on cocaine, it's the act of robbery that's illegal. The fact that you do it on cocaine, it's no different than saying, oh, this person did a lot of Red Bull and 5-hour energy drink and a lot of Four Loko, and they go out and they get into a fight. You wouldn't say, oh, this person was just hopped up on caffeine, which is a drug in and of itself, but that drug's okay. But you don't have that same understanding of, oh, well, that person got really high on caffeine and went and punched somebody. It's no, that person went out and punched somebody. That person should have their liberty deprived of them, or compensation should happen as a result of that action, not the fact that they were high and did it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same kind of stuff. I know I'm talking about alcohol a lot, but it's the same kind of stuff with alcohol. Like, someone gets into a fight and knocks somebody out when they're drunk, and that person they knocked out, cracks their head on something and either gets seriously injured or whatnot. And you don't blame the alcohol. You blame the person that decided to ingest the alcohol. Like, so that's where, okay, if somebody gets hopped up on cocaine and goes fight somebody, it's not the cocaine's fault. It's the person that did it.
Right. And we've always had the understanding that it's not, you don't have an excuse taken away from you when you're drunk. You are still held responsible because you put yourself into that predicament. So this doesn't violate the understanding of responsibility when it comes to committing crimes while high on whatever you use. And like you said, a majority of people probably use it just in their own home. A lot of people don't even use it. But the very fact that you have the ability to do what you want with your own body is the pinnacle of personal freedom. I mean, if you want to go out to Mexico and try an experimental treatment, you have the ability to do that, right? There's no law in America that says that that it's illegal for you to do it, because outside of the border, they don't have control over your body. So if they don't have control of your body when you go outside the border, why do they have control over your body when you're inside a border? You should have the ability to take whatever experimental treatment. If you want to run vitamin C through your body to try and beat cancer, and you think that's a proper way to go, why not try that? What's the harm to other people that you're going to do by doing that? But no, those things are regulated and they're illegal, and it's just run from federal government who views people underneath them as people that they need to control. And that's what it comes down to, is this ability to need the need to control you. It's an understanding of people who use those drugs are terrible people and they have to be demonized. But we see in countries like Portugal, who decriminalizes all drugs, they've had a decrease in death, in crime, in youth use, children use, and not children, but people under the age of 18 use of drugs. You have people who have been unstigmatized, I guess is the word, where they can go in for treatment. If you drop your friend off at a hospital for overdosing on heroin, they have the possibility of being charged with a crime here. In Portugal, not Portugal. What did I say? Yeah, Portugal. If you go into a hospital, they'll give you an exchange of needles, and AIDS there has gone down dramatically due to the having the ability to get unused needles. You have people that can get legally high under the supervision of doctors in a hospital, and that's completely limited the number of deaths per, I think, 100,000. I think it's like 3 who overdose. Those are great things. Those are good and legitimate and moral things to do. If the idea is that we care about people, we need to realize that for 100 years now, almost 100 years, we've been fighting the war on drugs. And at what point in time in this modern age does a 100-war fight need to continue? It's a failed system. It's a failed policy. It's led to the United States becoming one of the most overly populated prison systems. And it's an idea about controlling what you do with your body, which is an act of aggression, which is a violation of the non-aggression principle. So that's why libertarians support, at the very least, light libertarians support the legalization of marijuana, but that us hardcore libertarians here support the legalization of all drugs, and not just those drugs that are, the heroin and the cocaine and all that stuff, but experimental drugs, which actually got the President Trump allowed to happen. Which again, it's so odd that we have to go to one dude to tell us, hey, if you're dying and you have really no hope and you want to take this experimental drug, you have our permission. I mean, that's a bananas statement to think about. I'm sorry, I'm dying here. I could, if I was dying and I wanted to jump out of a plane and forget to pull my ripcord. Well, I should say there is a law against committing suicide, but at the same time, that's my personal freedom if I wanted to do that. So why are we allowing this type of environment to continue to exist? We've lost the drug war. It's immoral. We've thrown more people in jail. There are people sitting in Colorado jails and prisons right now for drug possession for marijuana, and they've legalized it. That's the mentality of the state. You cannot question the state. You have to have this groundswell from a local grassroots level, and that's exactly what we want to advocate for, because that's how things get accomplished. Colorado has state neutralized, has nullified federal law, and has said, no, you're not coming in here, feds, to take our citizens for marijuana. But at the same time, the state still holds people in prison by slavery to carry out sentences for something that's now legal.
Yeah, it's just so crazy if you really think about it. That some guy walking around with, an ounce of weed got arrested years ago and is still sitting in jail when kids can go out and do that. Well, not kids, but, 18 and over, I think, is the age there, can go out and do that right now. That's got to suck sitting in jail thinking about that.
Well, and just the very fact that, 13, 14, and on-up-year-olds have done drugs. I mean, if we can't keep them out of their hands, if we can't keep them out of prisons, what's the point of harming enough people outside of prison that we can't keep drugs out of in the first place?
Yeah.
And at the very least, what is the definition? What's the word for the definition of not allowing someone to do with their body what they want to do at times they want to do it? I mean, if that's not a drawn out definition of slavery, I don't know what is. It's the master doesn't allow you to do what you want at the time that you want because they own you. It's a slave type mentality that we need to get away from. So again, we're not talking about this crazy harebrained idea where we're just having a free for all where we're forcing cocaine up 8-year-olds' nose. We're talking about people being free to do what they're pretty much already doing at the rate that they're already doing it. We would just the regulation by the free market would make these products safer. I mean, half the time overdoses done by heroin and cocaine is a result of fentanyl or Comet being introduced to cut up the supply. And if you had a free market, you could say, hey, I went to grocery store X to purchase my heroin. I had a bad batch. Hey, guess what I can do? I can now sue the grocery store. I can sue the manufacturer. I can sue the people down the line who have given me this bad batch, as we do with anything else. And I can freely access medical assistance to treat an overdose more easily because I don't have to have a fear that they're going to turn in me or my friends or my family.
Yeah, the article I found too, it's funny. They talked about how the FBI is struggling with keeping up with cybersecurity because a lot of the people that work in cybersecurity that some of the best ones out there that the FBI could really use. Not saying we need the FBI, but they've smoked marijuana, and the FBI's rules, like if in the past 3 years when you're trying to get a job there, if you've smoked any marijuana at all, like you're disqualified and you can't work there. So they're actually Comey, back when he was, what he is, he noted that the agency is missing out on intelligent, highly skilled, and talented individuals whose only problem is that they use marijuana. So the own federal government is struggling with hiring better people for a job because they still have marijuana illegal.
Huh. Well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we should all start doing at least marijuana. If it hurts the federal
Yeah,
government, I think we should be okay with that. Yeah.
that's true.
So, what is the application here? The application is the war on drugs is insanely immoral. It affects at least it's got to affect somebody in everyone's family, whether it be just the person who uses it a couple times and quits, or the person who overdoses, or the person who gets in too deep. The war on drugs has failed. It's failed for 100 years, and hopefully we're starting to see the death knell of it. I don't know if I could convince enough people uh, in my community that marijuana is bad, but I would have a harder time of convincing them that all drugs are able to be uh, used by anybody. But at the same time, look at where we've gotten so far. And it's been the advocates of the Libertarian Party that have pushed for the legalization of marijuana from the start. So at a local level, we've seen this. We've seen it in Colorado. We've seen it in other states. And we're starting to see it here in Michigan. The things that you can do that promote it are having this understanding of a consistent philosophy of you own your body. You can do what you want to it as long as you're not harming anybody else. And through that prism, through that worldview, you can be informed that, hey, what is the harm that I do to other people through this? And if it's anything other than a direct tie-in to the drug, like, hey, if you took cocaine and you blew up and you killed your family when you blew up after taking cocaine, okay, maybe you can make a law. I don't know. You should privatize all laws, but at the same time, you could make the argument that cocaine would be a detriment to other people because you have the possibility to blow up from it. But if you go out there and you go and inform the townships, if you go to the cities and you talk about how the state, especially here in Michigan, the state is enacting all these crazy rules that we need to nullify. We have the ability for sheriffs to not allow the federal government to come in to operate within systems, especially for drugs. We can push for ballot proposals that decriminalize, especially marijuana, but you could do that for all drugs. You don't need the state involved in this, and you just have to get out there and start informing people. And it's what I've started to say more recently. This is the time to live radically, because we have to realize that with the amount of millions of people that we have in jail, we are an immoral country for doing this. If on one side of the spectrum that you believe that abortion is this insane national crime that America has taken upon itself, the drug war is just as insane. It affects just as many people. This is the time to live radically and allow people the freedom to do what they want, to get the help that they need, and to make people safer by the regulation, by the free market. If drug use isn't needed, if it's undesired, then people won't do it. But for the people who do want to do it, they're going to find a way. And by us saying that we need to put these people in jail, what we're saying is we need to stop them by force. And if they resist that force, it's okay to kill them. So we need to promote this understanding of legalization, because people are doing it. And it's hurting more people by having the state come and get involved in it. We were talking about this last night, about how these police departments, the FBI, run these underground stings where they just let criminals exist so that they can get other criminals. But there's never any an end goal. There's no like, okay, well, we got Capone, but now we got Whitey Ford, and once Whitey Ford's the top and sole only person because we've got everyone else, then we have to take him out too. There's never any end goal, because the end goal would delegitimize the state. It would remove money from the state. And so that's what we have to support, is the end of the drug war. And I think you would see prisons and prison reform and criminal justice reform happen a lot more. If you want to get remove the congestion in the courts, get rid of the drug cases. If you're on a jury, there's this thing called jury nullification, which you have the right as a juror to say, yep, that person smoked weed, he admitted to it to the police, but you know what? I don't like that law. I am going to say not guilty because that's your right. Whatever the judges or the prosecutors tell you, you always have the ability to say, I do not agree with that law. And that's a tradition that's been found in juries since the founding. It's a product of the natural law. It's the understanding that the natural law exists. It's higher than anything else, and that we should adhere to that. So if you have someone who speaks out against the government and it's super mean and they've criminalized it, you as a member of the jury can say, yep, what he did was against a specific law in the book, but you can come by and say, I don't agree with that law, and vote not guilty. That's what should be done by everyone who sits on any type of drug trial at all, because unless that person has actively harmed that person, which is something completely different, you can nullify the drug law or the drug laws that way through jury nullification.
More juries should do that.
Yeah, and for a lot other things, it's not just drugs, but that's where you're finding, I think, the biggest holdup. That's what's driving this insane thing of, well, you have to plead to these charges because the courts will get backed up. I mean, we just heard about a case that's taken like 2 years to come to trial, and it got rescheduled because the courts are so backed up that they put it off from, it's now August. They wanted to put it off until January. I mean, that's a weird thing to do. If I have to cancel a dentist appointment, my dentist doesn't wait another 6 months for me to reschedule it. It's within a week. But when you have the state involved, when you have this mass congestion, this is what happens.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we're going to cut it short here today as far as our topics are concerned. We have definitely a number of other ones that we're going to do. So we're going to save those for next time. So again, the non-aggression principle is the principle by which we're looking through these different factors. And the question is, who are we harming? And are we okay with using physical violence, force against somebody to stop them from doing something? So for here at the podcast, we want to say, live radically and live free.
And legalize it.
And legalize it.